you grew up in West Germany. You're what people still today would call a West German designer, which I also find really interesting. We can touch upon that. But what for you was the biggest surprise about GDR design? Because the exhibition is really 50-50, right? It's East and West. It's completely even. I think we might have a few more objects from West Germany if you count every single saucer of every single cup, but generally, you know, that was a big part of this exhibition, that it's 50-50. But like, you know, what for you was the most surprising aspect of East German design, or a designer who you had never heard of? Or yeah, can you talk a bit about that?
Well, really for me, there were a lot of discoveries in this exhibition, or in this project, or working on the exhibition. And to pick out just one of, it's the discovery of a designer, Karl Klaus Dietl, who I had not really understood, you know, the kind of the scope of work that he has done, his importance within the East German design scene, and the parallel in a way to a figure that in the West and in the Western world we all know and recognize as one of the greatest designers, Dieter Rams. There are a lot of parallels, and I think it's very beautiful to discover that. The parallels are not only in the kind of their creative output and what they both designed radios, but in that both actually wrote well, kind of manifestos about what good design is, and both of them wrote them in the kind of late 60s, early 70s, and were very visionary from today's point of view. And that's the other thing that I think this, for me, this exhibition, especially looking at the East German design part in it, how relevant a lot of what was produced under certain circumstances, within a certain system, how relevant that has become today.
To be specific, you mean ideas about resourcefulness, maybe a
Yes.
kind of, nobody would call East Germany necessarily sustainable, but there is a kind of special sustainability that comes with being in a planned economy, right? Where you really have to design objects that last, because there isn't going to be a replacement. I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yes, and it's interesting, of course, that now I'm interpreting, you know, the simplicity is, you know, we are interpreting it into something that, you know, we all strive for now. You know, simple things that I can repair. Of course, the, you know, the motivation then was, you know, partly necessity. There were, you know, resources were limited. Things had to be standardized, simplified. They had to cost little money, be affordable. They had to last a long time, because nobody could afford, you know, throwing things away and replacing them with new. It was a different system. But just we've come round to understanding just how what quality that kind of system has. And if we look at it from today's perspective, and which is very different, we can still, however, learn a lot from it, because they're showing us examples of how that could work, and in fact be, you know, be very, like the Simpson Mokik. Interesting that you say nowadays more people driving it than ever in the DDR times, but it just shows that it seems to be still a good product today.
Right. I think it was Martin Roth who said when he was describing German design, he said it was born out of engineering. And I think another thing, like you mentioned Diedel and you mentioned Rams, is kind of these the equivalents, you know, in a sense. And there's something that they both have in common is how technical their work is and how technical aspects are really evident on the design itself. And I think that's something, like for me, that's always something that I describe German design specifically as being kind of very technically beautiful, and the technical aspect is very present on the surface level. But I mean, and that's also something I see in your work to some extent, but I think German design is so much more. And like, I guess my question for you would be maybe like, what other aspects did you find, what did you find similar between the two, other than this kind of, you know, very technical focus? And
well, and I would probably, I'd always add that you know, both designs are technical, but also very real. I think German design, and I think that is true for both East and West. We're very close to real. That means to real life, to everyday needs, to people, also on that kind of human scale. And I think this is something that I always felt was you know, an important aspect of German design and of the West German design that I knew so much better. But I've discovered that in the products shown in the exhibition as well. Things are just you know, there were maybe a lot of them didn't have the grand vision or innovation, but the quality was just another one. It was about a kind of a reality, something very close to life, to real life, to people, and I think that's I guess something in the German mentality is that as well. We are. I guess Germans are realists. Reality matters.
I'm always curious. Well, I mean, from the perspective of today, you know, it's the exhibition covers 40 years from 1949 to 1989, and it's very easy for this period to describe it as German design, right? It's so relevant, the national approach. But nowadays, I wonder how relevant it is. I mean, so many people would describe you as a German designer, and I'm curious if you would describe yourself that way, and also maybe like which of the rooms or the kind of atmospheres or the methods or the approaches that appears in the exhibition kind of resonates the most with your own work, because it's been 30 years since the end of this exhibition. Is any of this really relevant for you anymore, and is any of it kind of out of this German sensibility and proximity to, you know, you were saying like realist and form follows function? Is this something that you think about now in your work, or is it for you kind of time and come and gone?
I never thought the kind of the national identity mattered that much to my generation, and I would even claim to, I'm not sure if even Dieter Rams or Dietl would have said that was, you know, how they thought and worked. Interesting, in one article about Dietl, I read that his inspiration for building a very simple little car, the Trabant, came from the 2CV, the French car. So it wasn't that, you know, it was all about, you know, this is the German way of doing things. No, the 2CV, designed by the French, that was the reference.
Or the VW Golf is kind of an Italian design piece, if you will, right?
Yes. So, and you know, I'm sure Dieter Rams' kind of understanding and knowledge of design was far greater than just a kind of German world. He was, as we all know, very much inspired by Japanese culture. So I think the kind of the national identity of design is slightly overrated, and certainly for my generation, it didn't matter. I studied in England. So my training wasn't German. However, I am German. Of course, I grew up in Germany, and a lot of things in the exhibition I know because I am from that culture.
I mean, did it take you actually leaving Germany and having your training in this other completely different place to kind of understand what I'm doing in any way? Or was it, you know, the time that you studied was also the time of globalization and a time where, you know, like you were saying, national identity becomes less and less relevant. But we still see to this day, you know, exhibitions right now about young Swiss designers or young British designers. So it's still something that people use. Do you think it's relevant in our current environment?
Well, not necessarily relevant, but you know, also not a problem. So it's fine. I guess that for me, being abroad in the UK while I studied, I chose for my the kind of
like your focus.
The paper I had to write for my diploma, the thesis.
Yeah.
I wrote about German design in the 80s, particularly the scene of designers in Berlin at that time. I had a meeting with Borngräber.
Christian Borngräber.
With Christian Borngräber, who is there's a monitor and film about him, one of this kind of charismatic figures in that particular scene in Berlin at the time. I think I just because I was abroad, I grew an interest, a particular interest in understanding what that was going on in the country where I'm from. Had I stayed in Germany, I would have probably just emerged in this and kind of maybe taken part in it or not, but not thought that much about it. Being abroad kind of changed my perspective on it. And I thought it was really fascinating. And quite different, in fact, to England at the time. In England, there was Ron Arad, Danny Lane. They were also using angle grinders and so, but quite different. And there was Memphis in Italy, and the French had an interesting scene. So, yes, maybe, you know, all of, you know, that speaks for a kind of a national identity of all of these. But you know, at the time you said it was the beginning of globalization, and certainly the media was already becoming very international. So you'd read a design magazine, it would feature and cover design from all these different angles and countries and identities. And so, you know, it was probably, yes, it was good that you know, that each country had their identity, but it all came together into one kind of interesting mix-up of things happening. And that was what we were interested in, and not into kind of selecting the one identity.
You also, I mean, because we're talking about the international perspective, but also within Germany, I think one thing that's really striking about the history of German design is that it's so different from places like France or the UK, where you really have this main center for production and development and creation. And in Germany, it's full of centers. I mean, right? It's you've got so many different places where design was happening. Specifically, like now it's changing, I think, and it's leaning towards one city. But I think before, and especially with the time period that we looked at in the show, 49 to 89, it's just very dispersed.
Yeah.
And I guess yeah, I'm interested a bit in the shift, because you were in Munich for quite a while, and you really kind of put that city on the map for industrial design. And there was also kind of a group of people working in Munich, and a very particular kind of state of mind there, as opposed to now you've moved your studio to Berlin a couple of years ago. And although it's no longer divided, I guess, you know, it was East and West, and I'm interested in the differences from that shift, just based on the vibe, the inspiration for you as a designer, culture, politics, how it's been different for your work.
Well, I think my answer would be in a way similar to what I said about, you know, being German or not, living, working in Munich or Berlin. I think I like both cities. They are very different, but I wouldn't say it was the city that really inspired my work. It was not true for Munich, and not true for Berlin. In the end, it's well, these are, both cities are, you know, well, one city was my home, the other city is my home now. But I don't think it really has a strong impact on my work. However, you know, Munich, and I've been there for a long time, and as you said, there was a group of people in Munich at the same time, and other studios, and it seemed to kind of, there was a kind of scene, but not a scene, a design scene, but not a design scene of, you know, all of us meeting all the time and discussing, exchanging ideas. We just happened to be in that city, which offers a lot of great opportunity, good craftsmanship, technology, suppliers. You're close to Italy. All of that was kind of good, and everyone who is there uses that. In Berlin, the situation is different. It has different kind of advantages and other things. You know, I loved to kind of take the car and drive to Italy from Munich, and I can't do this now. But then I can go somewhere else by car.
Brandenburg, I mean.
Exactly, or to Poland, and so it just opens a different, another horizon or a different opportunity, and that's fine. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, yeah, it's all about access now, right? We have access to anything we want. So we've been in this very strange situation. I mean, I should also say, because we're talking about the making of, you know, we did most of this online, right? So this isn't really that weird for us to do this conversation on the internet. It's just different that other people are watching. But we had, you know, a lot of our work meetings, it was online. And I think that's something that's just, we're used to it now. So it doesn't really matter if you're in Berlin or Munich. Your inspiration is.
No. I mean, for I have to say, for this particular exhibition, Berlin was, you know, for me, being in Berlin was the right backdrop, because here in this city you live, you know, you live in the place where a lot of this actually happened, and you can still see so many traces of the divided city, of the two systems, but also, you know, beautiful pieces of architecture from both sides. And, you know, we talked about the Plattenbauten and Formsteine, but also, you know, there was, on the western side, there was the equivalent to it, and different. So I think, you know, my confrontation with the exhibition and design in this particular period of time is very well reflected here in being in Berlin, much more so than had I been in Munich.
I guess we don't have so much time, but I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the fact that you know, this is the third exhibition you've designed for our museum. And I know you've also done other exhibition design, but you're trained as an industrial designer. And I think a lot of people are really curious about just the difference in those fields and what it takes, you know, which kind of skills or which kind of perspective does it take between the two, and what is kind of the shared way of working and the differences in working on those two from your perspective?
Well, I mean, the difference is kind of in scale. One is very spatial, and the other is more or less, you know, a product or a thing. One is ephemeral. Most of the time, exhibitions, they, you know, now this exhibition might travel 5 years. That's a long time, but each venue will have the exhibition for something like 3 months, and then will be packed in again and built up again. So we have to think this exhibition as something ephemeral, whereas products are, you know, most of the time are made to last or have a longer life cycle. I think
specifically those from the GDR.
Yes, I think what I really like about exhibition design is that it's that you're, as an exhibition designer, you're creating an experience for someone, and I could actually I really think of the visitor all the time. How does the visitor kind of walk through the exhibition? You know, where do we need to kind of set certain focus and want their attention, and where should we entertain them? How can we layer the information to be from, you know, because every visitor is different. Some may see this exhibition in 10 minutes. Others would spend half an hour or even longer. The exhibition has to work for all these different visitors. You know, normally I'm not there in the exhibition to experience, to watch the visitor. How do they really walk through the exhibition? But it's an experience I can get to much closer than with any of my products, where also I think about, you know, how would someone sit down on a chair and for how long. But it's very rare that I cannot steer this experience in the same way as I feel I have kind of a possibility of steering the experience of an exhibition visitor by building the exhibition in a certain order and you know, creating focus and you know, scenography, as we talked about before. It's you know, I called it a trick, and I think playing tricks in an exhibition is quite interesting. You're really guiding the visitor through this experience. Playing tricks in objects is, I don't think is a good idea. But you know, doing both things, you can. I mean, you learn from designing exhibitions. You learn a lot about an interaction of people with objects, with space, with information. You learn about their attention to something that I can feed back into my other work, which is industrial products. Well, I guess one other aspect of, and I'll be brief, but one other aspect of exhibition design is, of course, that I'm thrown into a kind of a subject, a theme, you know, something that I know, usually I know very little about, and I have to catch up with that information. I have to learn about, you know, in this case, German design, 49 to 89. I had some knowledge, but now I know so much more about it. And it's also that experience of, digging into all this material, which I love, and it's really beautiful.
I mean, I think that was probably my final question, but you might have answered it already. I guess maybe the biggest challenge for you for this specific topic, because you've curated your own work in many exhibitions, but also in our museum you did a major retrospective here, and I think it's obviously very different to design an exhibition around the objects that you've also created. I mean, it's perfect, right, in a sense.
It's difficult, actually. It's more difficult. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think it's actually much more difficult working, with, my own things than with.
That is
we
such
did
a
the
relief to hear.
night. No. I think the distance makes it so much easier, and I feel the Night Fever exhibition, this exhibition, have been opportunities for me to work with material that like I said, I had to learn about it and understand it, create an understanding, and develop a sensitivity, and that's fun, but also really I like the learning experience, and I think like I said, the distance actually helps. So I always preferred an exhibition project that is not about my own things.
Well, Konstantin, I really want to thank you so much for taking the time to do the Instagram talk. It's just one of many digital talks you and I have had in the past months.
Yes.
It's been a thrill, and it's been such a pleasure to work with you and your team. Thank you so much, and
Thanks, Erica. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Goodbye.